Okay. Hi, Giselle. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you, Douglas?
Doing great. Thank you for coming on the show. It's nice to see you.
It's absolutely my pleasure.
So, where are you located? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from San Francisco.
Oh, okay. All right. Super.
Yes.
And I see your book back there behind you on the table, and it's called Force of Nature. This is quite a story, it looks like. This is your memoir. Why did you decide to write this book?
I actually started writing it while I was still employed. And as the job was getting less and less complicated, I had time on my hands. So I started writing my memoir and found myself at the place where at the present, where I had to discuss the people I was still working with, and I didn't know how to handle that, so I stopped writing it. Then my son was struck by pancreatic cancer, and 7 weeks later, on November 17th, 2018, he died of it at the age
Oh,
of 54.
well, I'm sorry.
And which is what happened to my late husband as well, who had died of the same disease at the same age 31 years before. And this was just before COVID struck. So I retired in 2020 and I picked up writing the book. By that time, I had started a nonprofit, the Gerald Huff, my son's name, Fund for Humanity, which is which the mission of which is to promote universal basic income, because that's what he was an ardent supporter of that concept. And so I thought that I would honor his memory by starting this nonprofit. And I picked up writing the book, and of course, I described what happened to me, how he died, and how I am devoting the rest of my life to bringing this solution, this transitional solution to the challenges of technological unemployment, um, as the way that economies can tackle it.
You mentioned universal basic income. Is there any other countries out there now that are actually doing that? I thought Switzerland had something like that.
No, they try to put it on the ballot. They vote on everything. Their whole country is run by initiatives, it looks like. The initiative failed. But Alaska has had a basic, uh, a basic income program, universal. Everybody gets it who, lives in Alaska for several decades, and it's being tried everywhere. In Kenya, it's been going. There's been an experiment that's been run by a private charity called Give Directly that's been running for 12 years. And it's such a simple idea. If people are poor, if people are in need, give them money. Don't make them run through hoops and fill out forms and stand on lines and get refused at the end of all that because they didn't dot the I or cross the T. If people are in need, give them money.
I think the argument against it is that people feel that it would not inspire people to work, that people would simply sit home and do nothing and collect their check every month.
Well, that was proven untrue when former Mayor Michael Tubbs of Stockton, California, started a program in 2019 ran for 2 years, 125 families, got $500 a month. And it turned out that And there was a control group, and it turned out that twice as many of them got better jobs than the control group.
That's interesting.
Because if you think about it, if you're stuck in one of two jobs and you have to show up and your schedule is not settled, you have no time to look for something else. But if you can take a day off and you can go and interview for another job, you have a good chance of being able to better yourself. You have to think about people who have no leeway whatsoever. You know that something like 40% of Americans do not have $400 in the bank to meet an emergency, like a car repair. If you can't drive your car, you can't go to work. If you can't get to work, you lose your job, and the spiral goes down. And this happens to a lot of people in this country. And it is not the case. It's been proven over and over again that when people get money, they do not stop working. It's not enough to live on. You can't live on $500 a month or $1,000 even. So, it's not accurate to say that people sit around and do nothing. Would you? And I'm not saying getting only $1,000 a month, but is there anything? Why are you working?
Well, no, it wouldn't change my life radically, but it sounds like such a nice idea. But there has been a lot of people that were adamantly against it, and I couldn't figure out why. That was the only excuse that I've ever heard, was that it would discourage people from gainful employment. But if you say that's been proven false, then Andrew Yang was a big proponent of that, wasn't he?
Yes. And if you look at my book, you will see that he has given me an endorsement.
Oh, great.
Oh, yes, I know him quite well. I was a big supporter of his. My son introduced me to him. Gerald was one of his probably earliest supporters when he started running in 2018. And obviously, Andrew put universal basic income on the map.
Yeah.
People didn't know any. I mean, it's been around since Thomas Paine, okay, back in the 18th century, but it wasn't made a household word until Andrew started talking about it when he was campaigning. And the latest iteration of it was the child tax credit, which cut child poverty in America in half in 6 months' time. What better evidence is there about a program? Most of the programs we have leave us pretty much in the same place. We hardly make any improvements. There have been the books like The Great Society. You notice how well off people are. It's been going on since the 60s.
Yeah.
Well, this in 6 months got rid of half of the children in poverty.
We don't have that much time left, and I want to make sure we get your book in. Let's pivot over to your book. Your book is called Force of Nature, and this is basically your memoir. I'm just looking at your bio here. You were a Holocaust survivor. You and your mother left France, came to America with $400. It sounds like the classic American dream sort of story. Do you remember what was the first thing you guys did, you and your mother, when you arrived in America?
Well, the very first thing, of course, was when we passed by the Statue of Liberty. Oh, and I described that moment because we came to New York and we stayed in New York. That was indescribable. Your listeners, your viewers should think about what it would mean to someone who just lost 18 members of her family, a child who was 11, who is on the boat that is bringing her to the dream place, and goes by in the early morning in the New York Harbor, the Statue of Liberty. I mean, it was, it's unforgettable. And in terms of, a more mundane thing, the thing I remember most, the very early, when I first got here, was going into a supermarket. Now, this was 1947, and even though the war had been over for 2 years, we were still not a land of plenty in France by any means. The economy wasn't back on track. And all through the war, my mother, we would get 1 egg a week. We had rationing. The Germans took everything and, left barely enough for people to eat. So going into a plain old supermarket in the Bronx where we lived and seeing these piles of food was incredible.
You reminded me of that scene in the Chaplin movie where they're all standing on the deck looking at the Statue of Liberty going through Ellis Island. Did you go through Ellis Island?
No,
No?
Not at that time anymore. That was earlier on.
Oh, okay. You had mentioned before we got on about Ken Burns. Can you re-mention that again?
Yes. So Ken Burns is running a series on PBS, the U.S. and the Holocaust. So he's reconstructing the position of the United States leading up to the Holocaust. That is, starting with the Hitler's rise and what was going on in Germany. And it really struck me, of course, being a Holocaust survivor myself, it would. But what I mentioned in my book is that my father's family came from Odessa in Ukraine. They left during the Bolshevik Revolution because my grandfather was a middle manager. So they escaped the Bolsheviks, and they had 5 children. My father being the third one, and they came first. They stopped in Turkey, then they came to France. This was in 1922. And when they were in France, the oldest son, who was 19 at the time, but, in those years, 19 was 50, he came to the United States to sort of reconnoiter because my aunt was still a baby. So they wanted to have someone ahead who could, see what was what and help them come to the United States. And then the Immigration Act was passed in 1924, which is what Ken Burns spends quite a lot of time describing. And it stuck them in Paris. And all those people died in concentration camps.
Wow.
My father, his 2 sisters, their husbands, my cousins, everybody was taken and killed because they couldn't come to the United States. The doors closed. And this was, Ken Burns describes this so well. And the most upsetting thing about it is, of course, the memories, right? I mean, going back to that, but also the anti-Semitism that underlied that whole thing, and to see it resurging again is beyond scary.
Gisele, we do have to wind this down. We are out of time, unfortunately. Thank you so much for coming on. My guest is Gisele Huff. Her book is called Force of Nature. It is your memoir. The story of your life sounds incredible, and I urge everyone to pick up the book and read it. Also on your bio, it says that all the proceeds are going to the Gerald Huff Fund for Humanity. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's your late son you mentioned earlier in the interview. Do you have a website that you want to give out?
Yes, it's www.fundforhumanity.org.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for coming on.
Well,
It was
thank
nice
you,
meeting
Douglas. It's been a pleasure.
Best of luck with the book.
Thank you.